Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to have you all with us today for this webinar as we explore how financial services and insurance leaders are moving from insight to action with agentic AI architectures and intelligent automation by leveraging system of execution to activate and operationalize AI in the enterprise context. So here's what we have lined up for you, understanding SOE. So we'll kick off with a recap of how we define system of execution. What is it exactly? Why does it matter in today's world? How does it different from traditional system of record and engagement? You'll see how SOEs transform static systems into autonomous workflows, activating intelligence at every step and workflow in the enterprise. Then we'll learn about how do you adopt SOE in the BFSI context. So we'll deep dive into real world adoption pathways. So whether you're building capabilities in-house, buying off-the-shelf platforms, or co-creating with technology partners, we'll map out the strategic considerations such as speed to value, differentiation, tech readiness, which guide your go-to-market decisions. Then we'll talk about how do you address some of the implementation challenges. So no journey is without hurdles. We'll help understand how to tackle the big barriers, legacy system integration, skill gap, governance, change management, and we'll try to share some frameworks around it to help you wire intelligence into your existing systems or infrastructure without any disruptive rip and replace programs. Lastly, we'll talk about how do you measure success and readiness. So we will try to cover all the metrics that matter. So beyond efficiency gains, you'll learn how to evaluate execution quality, speed to impact, continuous learning loops. We'll also outline the 5 pillars of provider readiness, from architectural maturity to trust enablement. So you can partner with the right ecosystem for long-term success. And then finally, we have saved some time for the Q&A as well. So many of you have shared questions prior to this webinar while registering. We'll answer those as well, and address questions on the chat as well, and try to address most of the pressing queries live. And then what we expect is that by the end of today's session, you'll walk with a structured playbook, which helps you in creating an architect or deploy and scale SOE in your organization, which helps you ultimately shift from dashboard to decisions, from tasks to truly autonomous execution. Thank you for joining us. And then let's get started with our first topic, understanding systems of execution. So as we discuss systems of execution, it is very important to understand the different pathways to adopt AI in the enterprise context. What we have highlighted on this page is 3 distinct choices for AI adoption in the enterprise, each with its own strategic focus and value proposition. So if we talk about individual or build your own AI, it's about amplifying humans. So this is about empowering your people directly. Think of every knowledge worker with an AI co-pilot at their fingertips, speeding up research, drafting client communication, or analyzing data in real time. The goal here is individual productivity, task acceleration, smarter decision making, and then building that AI enabled talent across your teams. It's often the fastest way to get started. No heavy IT project, just well governed AI tools that amplify your employees' capabilities. Next is the blue box, which you see in the middle, tech stack AI. How do you supercharge technology? Here we move into embedding intelligence into the applications and platforms that you already rely on: CRM, underwriting engines, claims processing systems. All of these become smarter with AI stitched directly into their workflows. This pathway drives process efficiency within tools, simplifies user journeys, and delivers a better UX in your standard enterprise platforms. It's about taking the AI from the desktop and hardwiring it into technology stack. So every click, every form, every transaction benefits from real-time AI insights. And then the rightmost box, which is what we are talking about today, systems of execution. How do you transform the workflows? We'll look onto the frontier of enterprise AI, autonomous workflows. So how system of execution shift from passive dashboards to active AI-driven processes that agentify both system of record as well as systems of engagement. Here, AI doesn't just recommend the next step, it executes it, automating end-to-end processes, enforcing governance rule, and continuously learning to optimize outcomes. So this is where you reinvent core processes such as claims handling, policy issuance, customer outreach, turning them into living, self-improving workflows. So as you evaluate your AI journey, there's a question to ask. Do you want to start with rapid individual wins, or are you ready to embed intelligence into your core platforms? Or perhaps you aim to leapfrog to fully autonomous execution-driven process. Each pathway has its merits, and most leading organization will pursue all three in parallel, sequence to balance speed, risk, and strategic impact. And then if we move on, and then if I reflect on some of the last few quarterly roundtables that we have been doing with our financial services customers, one thing which has consistently come across is, hey, we are doing a lot of AI pilots or deployment, but a lot of them are on the fringes, right? So those are not in the core operations of what we are doing as a bank, insurer, capital market firm, or as a retirement provider. And we see that most of our core technology and surround systems, which we call as core and core augmentation, we are investing heavily in terms of building dashboards, databases, intelligence. So we have all the data and intelligence, but the continuous message is that a lot of that is inert in nature and we are not able to act on it. And then that is the biggest challenge in the path we are taking in terms of data and operationalizing it in the enterprise context using the power of Gen AI, agentic AI. We believe that in the financial services world, there is no shortage of insights, but definitely a scarcity of agents, both human and AI agents, and a system that is capable of executing on that intelligence. So that is what we want to talk about today. And how do we look at process within each process? And how do we see a combination of human and AI agents coming together and technology, which is a system that is capable of executing on that intelligence data that we have in our enterprise context. And then if we move pages and what we are calling this as a whole, as I told earlier, is systems of execution. So it is an architectural evolution to bring enterprise AI to life. So as you are looking at a single process, you want to make sure to bring data into the process, so that you can activate that data into that process. First, each step in the process, you are able to create decision intelligence. Then you are able to orchestrate the whole process together so that there are several complex workflows and pieces that will go along. So how do you manage that? While you do all of that, you want it to be secure, compliant, right? So that the ability to take every process that we run as an organization, be it sales, marketing, HR, claims, underwriting, or IT, take all this process and how do I activate the data in the process and build decisioning intelligence on top of it, orchestrate the process, make it secure and compliant, is where system of execution comes in. It's not a third layer of technology like system of record or system of engagement. It is basically transforming existing system of records, engagements. So what system of execution enables is execution at scale. It should help us move from what we were doing a lot more of process automation, work automation, to actual autonomy. So it's allowing us to do more intelligent orchestration in terms of decision making, as well as self-actioning systems, and truly solves this gap which we have when it comes from intelligence to execution. So as an example, you can think about like a modern CRM platform, a flagship system of engagement. It tracks every customer interaction, logs every email, flags at-risk account, and offers insights like this customer hasn't engaged in the previous 30 days, the renewal date is approaching. It's intelligent, it's interactive, but it still leaves one fundamental gap. Someone has to decide what to do next. The insight is there, but it just sits. No follow-up email is getting sent, no retention workflow gets triggered, no discount offer is deployed. And in that silence, the opportunity dies. Value creation in this example falters not due to lack of intelligence, but because that intelligence remains inert. So system of engagement often plateau at generating intelligence that still depend on someone to act. Enterprise today have no shortage of insights, but a scarcity of agents and a system capable of executing on them. So system of execution closes this gap by activating intelligence, orchestrating agents, and driving execution. And then as we move pages, I want to discuss this one thing about, which is the most fundamental part of SOE. And then if you zoom in on the engine that drives system of execution itself, is the AI agent. So think of each agent as a self-contained workflow bot that senses, decides, and acts autonomously and in real time. So you have your orchestration layer, the brain, which has goals and instruction at its core. Every agent has a clear mandate, whether it's, say, you have to automate claim adjudication or proactively flag at risk policies. These high level objectives steer its entire operation. Then you have the context memory. Agents maintain both short term working memory, which is the current case detail, as well as long term memory, historical patterns, learned rules, ensuring decisions are informed by the full picture. Then you have the application logic behind the scenes. We embed RAG pipelines and multi-step workflows that stitch together data, business rules, and AI reasoning. So the agent can execute complex processes without manual intervention. Then you have the prompts for the foundational model. Tailored prompt templates ensure that the underlying LLM generates output exactly aligned to your policies, compliance need, or operational playbooks. Then you have the foundational model, the intellect. Here resides the GenAI itself, GPT-style models trained to understand understand nuance, interpret data, make recommendation, or take action that meet your objectives. Then you have the tools, the hands. Finally, the agents leverage like a suite of integrated tools, APIs, RPA bots, orchestration platform to carry out their decision across enterprise system. Now, whether it's updating a policy record, triggering an email workflow, or launching a remediation script, the tools transform AI's decision into real world operations. Together, these elements, orchestration, model, and tools, compose that agent. And when you chain multiple agents across your process, you can unlock fully autonomous, continuously learning system of execution. And then as we move to the next section, I would like to bring on Dinesh to tell us about how do you adopt SOE in the BFSI context as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Abhimanyu. So, folks, I think Abhimanyu gave a great overview in terms of what SOE is, what the whole story is in terms of how we're thinking about SOE. What I would speak about in the next few minutes is about from a BFSI context, how our enterprises adopting SOE. So we have started some decent developments in terms of how organizations, BFSI organizations in particular, have started adopting SOE, right? So we are going to touch upon some of those aspects in terms of what are some of the models or frameworks that they're thinking about when it comes to implementing SOE within their organizations. So I think it's important, right? It's important to talk about how actually BFSI enterprises are, actually bringing systems of execution to life within their enterprises. If you look at from a broader perspective, there are two main approaches that BFSI enterprises are following, right? Which is one is a process-led prioritization approach, and the other one is a domain-led approach. Now there are different nuances from a focus area perspective, from a key benefits perspective, which organizations can typically get in terms of which path they would want to follow. So I'll touch upon some of both of these approaches, right? So I think the process-led prioritization approach, focuses on the high friction workflows across both BFS and insurance enterprises. So think of workflows like loan origination, claims handling, KYC, onboarding. So these are processes with high volume, high regulatory stakes. So improving them or transforming them via agentic AI or SOE as we're calling it, these would bring immediate ROI. This will lead to faster approval, reduce leakage, fewer compliance breaches, right? So that's the first approach that typically we have seen BFSI enterprises taking. The second is a more, investment heavy, a long-term approach, which is a domain-led approach, right? So this would target some of the broad areas such as, AML management, fraud detection, enterprise risk management, or within, from an insurance perspective, maybe the underwriting function within specialty lines, right? So this the approach which enterprises are taking from a domain-led is expected to deliver long-term benefits, will require a lot of strategic investments, and again will have impact across multiple processes within the organization, right? So in terms of what we are seeing and what we are advising our clients in terms of what approach that they should go with, I think the approach which would work best is sort of a combination of both, right? Which is start with the process-led pilots to prove value quickly, because I think ROI, we are seeing a lot of focus on what exactly is the ROI of some of these investment which BFSI enterprises are making, right? So from that perspective, I think following a process-led approach for the initial pilots become quite important. While at the same time, I think in parallel, what we are saying is also, keep investing in the domain-wide platforms. So from an insurance context, again, something like a fraud detection or compliance monitoring across the enterprise, I think that is something which is going to reap benefits from a long-term perspective, right? So broadly, these are the two approaches, that we have seen or that we are advising clients about in terms of how do you think about bringing systems of execution to life, right? So while we talked about the where part, I think it's also important to understand or have a framework in terms of how do you actually get these SOE capabilities that we have been talking about, right? And I think that's also one point we would like to hear more from our audience in terms of, how are you building these SOE capabilities? So is it, mostly you're building this in-house? Is this, mostly buying off the shelf? Or is this something that, thinking about co-creating with some of your ecosystem partners, right? So we'll give some minutes to our audience in terms of, uh, just giving your vote in terms of what are some of the approaches that you have been following, and then I think we can talk about the results and in terms of how we are seeing based on our research, our data points in terms of how BFSI enterprise are actually thinking about this. Okay, I'm starting to see some initial reactions from our audience. Yeah, I think we have answers from the audience. We'll just maybe give 10 seconds more and then we can end the poll. Okay. So again, I think what we are seeing here is that most of the enterprises, most of the audiences co-creating some of these with their ecosystem partners, followed by I think building this in-house, and I think followed by buying off the shelf, right? And again, there is certain percentage, 19%, who have not yet decided in terms of the approach that they are going to take on this. So I think with that, we'll move to the next one, which is about how we are seeing what's happening in the industry, right? So I think if you look at the industry, right, and this is based on the research that we have done, some of the data points. So it's a if you look at largely, it's a buy approach that we have seen our clients taking, right? Which is buying some of these SOE products off the shelf, followed by I think the wide majority, which our audience is talking about, which is co-creating some of these with some of your ecosystem partners, right? So I think from a build versus buy versus co-create opportunity, I think if you look at the build aspect, so this approach that we have seen is more suited for some of these proprietary, high differentiated capabilities. For example, from a bank's perspective, like the internal credit scoring IP or an insurance unique claims fraud model, right? So I think these are typically the use cases we have seen that the build approach is going to work. From a buyer perspective, I think what we are seeing, and our data also shows the same. So this approach is ideal when you need a lot of proven standardized solutions for your functions. Let's say something like a regulatory reporting or AML case management. Some of these functions are where speed and scalability are quite important. So this is where we are seeing the buy approach being followed by BFS enterprises. And I think co-create, I think that is the approach which a lot of our audience members are taking. So this is where a lot of the role of some of your ecosystem partners also comes into the picture, which is how do you blend your domain expertise from a BFS or insurance perspective, some of the core capabilities that you have, let's say from an underwriting perspective, from a claims perspective, how do you combine that with technology, with your partner's technology to accelerate innovation? I think that is where the co-create approach comes in, right? I'd also like to talk about a recent example that we have been following, and this is more from a insurance perspective, right? Which is AIG partnering up with Anthropic and Palantir specifically for its transformation of its claims and underwriting function. So they have brought Palantir and Anthropic as their technology partners to completely transform the underwriting function, right? So the main objectives they're looking for is just improving the overall underwriting code to submit ratio, and also just reducing the overall submission timelines, right? So that the underwriting can focus on more submissions, because that's a big challenge which, AIG and a lot of insurers, particularly in the specialty lines and commercial lines, have been facing. So I think that's a big area where we also see a lot of opportunities from an SOE perspective, and that is where we just wanted to highlight this particular example that we have seen in the industry, right? Uh, I think moving on, so while we talked about how to acquire these capabilities, how insurance enterprises, BFSI enterprises are sort of getting these capabilities, it's also important to know that SOE is not a single product that you can buy off the shelf, right? So it involves a lot of a lot of work with some of your ecosystem partners. So let's talk about how that ecosystems look like, right? From a BFSI perspective. So there are different parties, different stakeholders that we see that an organization will need to bring in to actually deploy some of these SOE capabilities, right? So starting with hyperscalers to some of these enterprise platform providers to some of these pure play AI providers, and then following that with some of your automation partners and AI and data providers. I think working with all of these stakeholders is essential to building a strong agentic AI or SOE capabilities, right? So when it comes to hyperscalers, providers like Microsoft, AWS, Google, so most of these providers are providing those cloud native AI and LLM infrastructure and computing power capabilities. So how you work with that, right? So from an insurance perspective, enabling fraud detection model to process millions of car transactions in milliseconds. I think that is some of the capabilities which some of these hyperscalers are bringing onto the platform. Similarly, from an enterprise platform providers, a lot of insurers and banks, BFS firms are working with providers such as Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and they have also made a lot of investments from a domain perspective, right? So these some of these providers can bring in the technology to transform the processes, but I think what they also need is that domain expertise and how to bring the ROI, right? So that really becomes important from an enterprise platform perspective. Similarly, I think we are also seeing a lot of these pure play agentic AI providers emerging, right? Both from a BFS and insurance perspective, who are just targeting specific parts of both the banking and the insurance value chain. So we are seeing a lot of investments and a lot of opportunities from partnering with some of these pure play agentic AI provider, mainly to get some of those domain related aspects. I think at the last we have the AI and data providers again, which is a big piece of the overall agentic AI or the SOE puzzle, right? Which is you have a lot of data. Both banks and insurance firms are sitting on a ton of data. So how do you actually use that data? How do you convert that unstructured data to actually use AI on top of that, right? So that really becomes important, and players like Snowflake, Databricks are playing a big role in enabling some of these, right? So I think from a overall, if you look at the big picture here, right? So the challenge which BFSI enterprises are facing, and something that we have been noticing based on a conversation with some of our BFSI clients, is about how to combine these layers so that you have a more integrated, seamless solutions, right? And I think one of the biggest things that BFSI enterprises, and particularly given that it's a heavily regulated industry, is also looking at some of those data security and compliance related aspects. So how do you take care of some of those aspects while at the same time bringing all of these elements together? I think that really becomes important as you start thinking about moving from a data rich organization to a real time compliant and coordinated execution organization, and completely transform some of the workflows that you might have, right? So that's the key message that we have out here in terms of what is the ecosystem looking like, right? So I think when it talks about how we are seeing this playing out in from a BFSI enterprise perspective, right? So we talked about how enterprises are getting those capabilities. We talked about what are the different ecosystem partners that organizations or BFSI enterprises need to work with. But in terms of the actual deployment or the implementation of some of these capabilities, what's the status right now, where do we see organizations standing, right? So the way we are defining this is, the spectrum is sort of looking like a basic, evolving, leading, and then a SOE grade spectrum, right? So something like, a basic would will have, some of these basic automation RPA tools. There might be a few pilots here and there. Evolving is more about, you have made a lot of investments in your AI and enable ML capabilities, and you also have orchestration, but I think it's really is fragmented and sitting across different system, and that is quite siloed. So that is, I think, something that we are classifying as evolving enterprises from a BFSI perspective. The third one is leading, right? And that is where I think most of the providers, or some of the providers that we're talking to, would fall into, especially the digitally native insurtechs or some of the fintechs, they would fall into the leading category. So players in this category often have, mature orchestration in terms of their overall workflows, be it claims within the insurance or the overall lending operations. They will have made a lot of investments from an AI perspective. They have, thought a lot about some of those data security, data privacy related aspects, some of those governance frameworks. So that is where some of those organizations will fall into the leading category. And I think the ideal state, which we are calling the SOE state, right? So this is the most powerful state that we are talking about. And I think a lot of enterprises are sort of, seeing this as their North Star, and this is something that their ideal state, this is the ideal state that they would want to be. So I think in this state, the ideal state would look something like AI agents orchestrating across different processes, different domains within both the BFS and insurance enterprises. Like, so things like fraud, lending, claims, and real-time fraud detection. I think this is where organization would ultimately want to be. So as I said, right, so this is a spectrum based on how the kind of investments which BFSI enterprises have made. A lot of the traditional firms that we have talked to, or based on the research that we have done, would typically fall in the evolving category, wherein they have made certain investments from an AI and ML perspective. But I think when it comes to bringing this all together to actually transforming the workflow, that is one big area where we are seeing, that there is a lot of opportunity, right? So before I move on, again, I think what we would like to do is, just take the audience's opinion in terms of, where does your organization stand in your SOE journey, right? So are you just starting to explore some of these SOE use cases? Have you already, defined the use cases that you want to go after and have selected those specific domains? Are you actually, thinking about scaling is across different processes, different domains within the organization? Or at the end, I think, right, which is the more ideal state, which is, you have, enterprise wide orchestration using both a combination of, agentic and human agents, right? So again, we'll give 10 seconds for the audience to react to this, and I think then we can get into the next few pages. So again, I think we are starting to see some initial reactions from the audience. What I'm seeing is that, most of the audience members or enterprises are just starting to explore certain use cases, right? And I think this sort of also aligns with what we are hearing in the market, what we are observing. And I think this is followed by pilots in selected domains, right? So again, I think this sort of concurs to what we are hearing in the market, which is, identifying certain use cases, certain domains that you would want to go after, and then completely transforming those certain processes. I don't see a lot of votes in the last category, which is mature enterprise-wide orchestration. And again, which is completely in line with what you're thinking, because I think that's the ideal state and something that you would want to ultimately achieve. So I think let's quickly keep moving to the next slide, right? Which is how do you acquire some of these capabilities, right? So in terms of the way we are thinking about acquiring these capabilities to move up the maturity curve, right? So if you're a traditional bank or an insurance company, if you're in that evolving stage, if you're just starting to explore some of these use cases, how do you actually move to some of these higher stages, which is, let's say the leading stage or the SOE grade form, right? So there are four broad categories that we have outlined on this page here, right? And which we think is quite essential to become a SOE grade organization, right? So these four categories are data activation, decisioning, process orchestration, and security and compliance, right? Because that again is a important piece to the overall SOE puzzle. So when it comes to data activation, I think it's important that we move from static batch-driven reports to real-time agent-triggered insights. From a decisioning perspective, I think the investment or the focus would be to move from a human-led, manually driven approach to more autonomous decision making. So that solves your AI decisioning part. From a process orchestration, I think we have been talking a lot about orchestration, right? So which is this. So the focus here is more about from how do you move from manual triggers to dynamic multi-agent coordination, right? Wherein multiple agents are working together across different processes to kind of transform the entire workflows. That is where the process orchestration aspect comes from the picture. And I think at the last, we have the security and compliance aspect, right? So how do you keep up with some of these regulatory changes? I think there are a lot of developments also happening from a regulatory perspective. Again, as I said, BFSI is a very heavily regulated industry. So how do you also keep up with some of those data and regulatory related aspects? That also becomes quite important as you think about becoming or moving up the overall maturity curve from, let's say, an evolving organization to a leading, or let's say an SOE grade organization. So as I said, so this is what we wanted to mention from how enterprises are thinking about implementing or adopting SOE from a BFSI perspective. I think what we will do now is talk about some of those implementation challenges, right? In terms of some of the challenges I think I already described, but I think beyond that, what are some of the things that you need to consider as you think about implementing SOE in your organizations? And for that, I think I'll pass it over to Subba. So, Shavesh, over to you.
Thank you, Dinesh. I think you have wonderfully put in terms of what exactly an execution level, what are the North Stars going to be looking like for an enterprise grade SOE for an agentic future, right? But it does come with its own challenges, as well as what exactly are those specific requirements that is needed as of right now. We know we briefly touched on this, but to begin this section with, we can start with this quick poll on this one to know what are the current biggest challenges that is in terms of your implementation barriers, right? So I'll just give a quick small moment to the audience to just chime in terms of like what are exactly their current major challenges that we have seen. Yeah. So we'll just take a few moments more, and I think we do have an understanding, like what is coming up as a major barrier that is in terms of the implementation of the overall SOE SOE grade implementation. Yeah. So yeah. So I think what we have clearly seen is legacy tech being one of the major legacy tech, as well as the integration issue being one of the major challenges as of right now, followed by your unclear business cases, right? The question also lies in terms of where do you exactly bring in the understanding, or where do you exactly implement some of these requirements. I do see some of the majority of the votes also has gone into like don't know where to start, but that ambiguity could be also be resolved by some of the frameworks that we're going to talk about. So just to briefly go in terms of like what we have seen as majorly the challenges, right? So following on to the next slide, you'll see when we talk about the challenges, we divided into four main areas. And what do they look like exactly, right? In terms of the BFSI, the main common problem statement that has come across so far is the systems are the core banking or the policy or the administration of the claim system which are there. They are very siloed in nature. There are different languages that they speak, and the fragmentation kills the real-time decisioning, the insights that is required, or the dynamic decision that needs to go into picture. So where does exactly that gets to need solve from? players like APN, Pega, and ServiceNow, what we have seen is they're stepping in inside the existing systems already. They're not trying to rip and replace your core systems, but they want to unify all the data platforms that are there. Now, what we have seen is like they are coming up with their own orchestration, the workflow engines, as well as the real world use cases for the BFSI enterprises to implement as soon as possible. So what example that we have seen was like Salesforce coming in together to stitch an underwriting and a claim system to enable fraud detection as soon as possible. In terms of the second areas in which we do see an implementation challenge with the technology constraints, right? We do see where the one of the areas that also comes in terms of is where do we exactly start with? What are the kind of technology constraints that have come in? So in terms of when you go, in terms of where we see this as a major challenge is providers like UiPath, EXL, and Q2 coming in and deploying orchestration layers. The main missing factor is the orchestration layer because there are systems which are way too older to talk to each other, particularly in the mature areas like lending, servicing, and underwriting as well. So what we have seen is one interesting use case that we see in the US bank was the modernization initiative that they wanted to take. They went ahead with small business lending operations along with UiPath, and those orchestration bots were able to help them in top of their mainframe systems, cutting down their overall rewriting course to approval rate by 40%. Thirdly, in terms of the talent and the capabilities gap, it is no surprise that we have seen the talent being a major issue in terms of a deployment of the agentic AI system, right? But what is not exactly just can be solved for just pure manpower, where we need to understand where are these intelligence systems come in, especially in areas like fraud, credit operations, and claims. We see the major hurdle being not just an skill issue, but also the training that is required in them. So in such cases, we do see AI agent codes can come in and fill in these gaps. Players like Data Robot and S2O AI are providing non-technical low-code systems that are able to provide instant claims processing center or automated first notice of loss, or even intuitive AI support that is required, enabling junior staff to manage complex cases very independently as well. And lastly, the risk and compliance piece. So even if it's the implementation area, the main area lies in terms of how do we govern these different AI bots as well as the different automated systems, right? So it comes into terms of the decisioning, the auditability, the explainability, the regulatory compliance, and it becomes completely a non-negotiable points. So we have seen players like FICO, NICE, Actimize, and Turn Native are building control systems directly over in terms of the system of executions, embedding mostly the explainability as well as the bias mitigation from day one of their implementation. We also recently saw a large bank who are utilizing FICO's tool to embed AML policy check inside the credit decisioning processes, reducing regulatory escalations up to by almost even 30%. So that being said, these are the challenges, right? But how do we exactly mitigate these challenges? Is there a framework that we can go ahead to mitigate these challenges, right? So at Everest, what we have done, we have looked at these systems very closely and understand, right? Try to make sense of like how do we make these systems talk to each other, and we present you the WISE framework the BFSI enterprise can utilize on their systems. So the WISE stands for Wire, Integrate, Sense, and Execute. In terms of wire, where I would like to understand is the wire is basically the securely how do you securely access the data from the legacy systems, right? So in terms of the data that is already trapped on these legacy old system, are you able to break it down in terms are you able to break it down as chunkable bytes and able to talk to each other? So the main system that comes in are the API and the gateways and event streams and the data fabrics. Are we able to connect them through the right APIs, the right tools, the right stack? So there have been examples in the past where we have seen mortgage servicing systems being able to touch their COBOL stack without even going into the nitty-gritty of disturbing the overall systems, as well as enabling fraud detection on the present workflows. So in terms of integrate, the key component lies in terms of how do you coordinate different workflows, right, across all these legacy systems with the AI systems. What we have seen is combining the legacy process with the new AI-driven decisioning engines will work charms in your favor. You just need to know what are the workflow engines, the business rule, and the orchestration layers. One clear example that we had seen was in terms of the claims operations. For instance, like we seen integration of AI-based triads engine system in its legacy claim admin systems, routing simpler cases for straight throughput processing or flagging complex one even in the human review. Thirdly, in terms of sense, this is where it get very interesting in terms of contextualization intelligence, and that is where the AI main power needs to come in. You, even if you are able to connect the systems together, the framing, the wiring that has been done, it all needs to make sense for the AI bot to understand where it needs to get contextualized and not present any incorrect information. So you need to use AI ML in these scenarios, mature platforms, to contextualize the area and build the brain of the whole system. Decisioning platforms like ML models and scoring engines need to be integrated and make as smart as possible by using the sense lever of this framework. And lastly, in terms of the execute, this is where exactly the trigger lies, where you have to see where the agentic AI systems are taken into action. Think of any sort of low code or low code platforms or RP or AI agent that you have already seen, right? The service connectors working together needs to drive these execution, filing forms or updating records, triggering next best action, like what are the areas in which you need to contact your customers. So all of that will come without any human intervention. And what is the beauty of this framework will be, it does not demand full replacement of the legacy system. Instead, it works around the present systems which you already have. The layer needs to be smarter, progressive, as well as AI powered. With that, I would like to come to one interesting slide in terms of what exactly this WISE framework in terms of execution would look like, right? If we divide in our systems and the different layers that we would want to see the workflows where they are present, we will divide into three main areas, right? The tool layers, the orchestration layer, and the foundational model. So here, what you have seen is the first layer is the tools layer, the system's backbone. You wouldn't see there's any dearth of any sort of the dearth of tools that are present in the enterprise landscape. You have your tools for ERP, your CRM, your MES, your email platforms. These are the tools which generate insights. These are the tools that will be executing your decisions and breaking down all the silos that are present in your framework. Second comes the orchestration layer. This is where the agentic heart lies, the intelligence, the main brainchild of the overall framework. Where this is where you need to see systems that are able to detect signals. Are you able to see the customer churns that are coming in from the CRM systems? Are you evaluate them against the goals that are already present in your systems to minimize downtime and comply with all the SLAs that are present? Are you able to build in any sort of structured prompts that will given the right context to engage with the different enterprises, the different clients that you have, right? And lastly, in terms of the third layer, the foundational models, the reasoning engine comes into this layer. What you need to do is understand where the next best action needs to come in, right? So with the justification of this decision rationale needs to come in from here. The recommendation output format that you need, it should have a task, it should have an alert message and an automatic system or a trigger, right? All of this goes back to your tools layer, but it helps into the overall execution. So this is where how a system of execution for an enabled system would look like. And to tie all this up in terms of what we would see in terms of the next slide, in where exactly are we seeing all of this wrapping up together, right? So we need to solve in for four main layers overall. The one is the data activation layer, where you see all the active data and the streams that can come in. The data is real time, the data is semantic, the data is event driven. Secondly, followed by the orchestration platforms. You will have systems that will coordinate seamlessly with each other to stitch all of these together in your business operations, and these platforms need to manage their workflows all together as well. Thirdly, in terms of the agentic overlays, you need to have autonomous execution system enabled for each other, where you see the low code tools, the RPA, the AI agents come together and talk to each other in terms of trade executions or any sort of claim adjustments, right? And lastly comes the decisioning platform. You need to build in smarter decisioning platforms, the AI ML based decision platforms, the ingestion of the data, the models that apply to it, the contextual decisions that need to come in should be more real time. So together, these layers, activation, decisioning, orchestration, and agentic execution, you'll see a powerful non-invasive system that lets your BFSI firms from insight to action without rewriting your existing tech stack. And what we have done presently is in terms of understand each of these systems on a BFSI cohort, and we'll ask our audience to chime in with us in terms of if you want to get a deeper dive from an LOB, from a process perspective in lending, your cards and payments, or your fin crime wealth management, or your LNA, or your property casualty or reinsurance areas. These are the areas we can talk you through in terms of understanding where you can build your system of execution in these processes. With that being said, we would want to go into our next section in terms of how do you measure all of these in your in your execution level.
Thanks, Suresh. I believe we've taken a very interesting, point of view around systems of execution. We covered the foundational understanding of SOE, what is the relevance, how is the adoption looking like for the BFSI space, challenges, implementation. And now, as Savesh mentioned, we are going to do a dipstick on how do you measure success in the first place? How do you assess the provider readiness? And again, we'll definitely, try to be on time to close right in for, Q&A session. To keep us moving, if we look at the SOEs, they are fundamentally reshaping how enterprises operate in the very first place. So no longer we are bound by very rigid process flows or very fragmented technology stacks. Imagine replacing the static SOPs with workflows. And again, these workflows are adapting on a very real-time basis based on what is the context, what is this exception that's coming in, and what is the outcome that we need to drive. So that's what SOE delivers. For banking, for example, I take the loan origination process. It can dynamically reroute based on any customer's risk profile. It can eliminate some of these manual escalations, as we move forward. On the technology side, SOA acts as a very, real-time decision-making layer. It is orchestrating some of these legacy systems and some of the new age platforms simultaneously. So think of this as an insurer automating the claims approval. I think Dinesh and Abhimanyu were both alluding to how it is making an impact on the insurance segment. So coming back to the example, thinking of that insurer automating the claim approval by coordinating inputs from the CRM, policy systems, AI-based fraud engines, it essentially transforms the workforce. So we are seeing across in our conversations that AI agents are taking over these repeatable actions around KYC verification or invoice matching, or freeing up the human teams that are focusing on that exception handling. And finally, it is bringing together the real-time historical data into a very unified decision fabric. At the end of it, it's as Abhimanyu said, it's not just automation, it is intelligent execution at enterprise-wide scale. That's how leaders are moving from efficiency to true agility. Let's keep us going. And now if we sort of double click on how does the SOE transform the IT operations from very reactive firefighting into intelligent proactive service management? At the core, you see that there is an agent-powered SOE framework that is mimicking your human cognition through these layers around perception, reasoning, and execution. So again, it's starting with ingesting some of these signals, whether it is coming from some of the log tickets, some of the alerts, or in the AI world, I believe observability is making a lot of sense. So it could be the signals could be coming from some of these observability tools, and then you bake that into a perception layer that is going to understand and classify issues in real time. That reasoning layer is then going to kickstart your rule engines, your memory frameworks, simulations to finally determine what is that best course of action. And then it's running in that feedback loop. Finally, your execution layer is enabling that self-healing or that feedback loop. It's an automated resolution. It could be around compliance tracking without the need for a human intervention. And if an escalation is needed for that matter, that issue flows into your L1 and L2 support. And when that gets resolved autonomously, the system learns, it's updating its memory, and the next time such an event occurs, the response has much more improved. All of this is then finally feeding into the uniform dashboard that we were referring to, for your SLA governance, for your process optimization. The result, it's a service management model that's no longer reactive. It's self-aware and it's continuously improving. Let's keep us going. And when we are seeing that shift from automation to autonomy in IT operations, it's enabled by SOEs. That shift is driven by three enablers: agentic AI technology, intelligent processes, AI literate talent. So again, and this shift, the three enablers, these foundational elements, they are very core to the broader SOE loop. So again, if we want to make sure that it continuously senses, reasons, acts, learns, we need to ensure that the technology, the process orchestration, and the talent are, all in the right place to make sure that it is scalable enough. And, we go back to this point around making it enterprise grade at the end of the day. Keeping us moving. Thanks, Avesh. So what does success in the SOE framework look like? And success here is not just defined by efficiency alone. It's going to be how intelligently execution is going to drive some of our business outcomes. Organizations, enterprises, especially on the those that are in a regulatory environment, they have to look at these three key dimensions. What is the quality of execution? What is the speed to impact or the time to impact? And what kind of an operational efficiency we are gaining at the end of the day? That means tracking not just some of these lagging indicators such as your cost and SLA compliance, but also looking at some of the leading signals. Those could be, say, around what is the percentage of AI managed exceptions, model override rates. It could also be AI human workload balance. What does that look like? So enterprises in a nutshell need to adopt continuous feedback loops to ensure agentic systems are not just executing tasks, but they are learning, they are improving over time, and ultimately they're delivering that self-optimization and strategic agility. Let me conclude, in the next segment. To serve enterprises, financial services enterprises effectively on their SOE journeys, providers must demonstrate that kind of a maturity across these 5 foundational pillars, be it around architectural readiness, and that architecture is around cloud, APIs, low latency systems, the operational intelligence integration around, what is happening, where we are moving beyond the insights to real-time execution. What is the outcome engineering? Then providers also need to have, sort of look at a very robust governance capabilities that is built into their execution flows. The shift is very clear. And again, it's that shift from siloed project-based execution to intelligent, integrated, and iterative operating model powered by AI. Quickly keep us moving and, just summarizing. Identifying a truly SOE-ready provider is going to require a very new lens for any enterprise. You need to focus on intelligent execution and not just automation. To select some of these providers, ask different questions. What actions can AI take without human gating? They deliver those composite solutions that blend decisioning, data orchestration, rather than offering some of these silo tools. Most importantly, how does that continuous feedback loop operate? How does that look like? To sum it up, tying the success to some of these shared KPIs upfront is going to be the new benchmark for intelligence services delivery. With that, let's take a pause for any questions, any reactions that the audience have. I think we have received a few questions. We could take some of those as well.
Yeah, I think we had one question. I think we are at the top of the hour, but I'd just like to cover that. I think we had one of the questions before the webinar that with rampant cybersecurity breaches and litigation due to AI-led claims rejection, how is AI adoption pace within the highly regulated insurance industry? So just a brief answer to that would be the AI adoption in insurance is accelerating, but in two speeds. What we are seeing is scaling low risk Gen AI, agent assist, document summarization, fraud triage, because the ROI there is very clear and the data can be contained. But for some of the high stake complex decisions such as underwriting, pricing, claim denial, we are moving deliberately with that human in loop explainability and the audit trails. Breaches and litigations aren't stopping adoption. They're more of reshaping it in terms of tighter third-party risk controls, data minimization, centralized governance. Regulators are raising the floor, NAIC guidance, Colorado's rules, EU AI Act. So the roadmaps are compliance first, and then the bottom line is that expect more production rollouts throughout 25-26, paced by risk and not the hype.
And we've almost reached the top of the hour, so let's just close out today. If folks have other questions, feel free to reach out to us. You have our coordinates. But just wanted to quickly, give everyone a view on Everest Group's event Elevate, which is not just going to be another industry event. It's a high impact, insight rich experience. It's exclusively for senior leaders driving growth in B2B enterprises. It's going to be taking place in September, between September 10th and 12th in Dallas. This year's theme is around proven strategies to accelerate growth, and we will focus on what truly truly moves the needle. What does smart revenue planning look like? What does strong acquisition look like? And what are some of the sharper buyer, and sort of layer that in with sharper buyer intelligence. You will be joining over 300 senior execs and over 40 of our analysts for candid discussions, some of these practical frameworks and powerful peer exchange. We look forward to hosting you there. The details around the cost are already here. And Elevate is where some of these conversations will happen.